In a big city, there's a high school boy named Kyle who has an athletic body and a good-looking face. Not only that, he is a rich kid who has a luxurious apartment unit, and his father is a famous boss of a news media company. But Kyle doesn't have a mother because she has died. In his school life, Kyle is the most popular student who already has a beautiful girlfriend, and now he wants to become the president of a club. When giving a speech, he talks about someone's appearance, and he proudly admits that he is indeed good-looking and rich, and he knows that this is the reason why the students chose him to be the club president. This makes a student named Kendra feel unhappy with what Kyle says, because they both like to compete in everything for a long time. After giving a speech, Kyle sees his campaign poster that has been scribbled on, and it turns out that Kendra did it. But Kyle responds calmly because he still believes that many students support him to be the president, including a girl named Lindy, who will become his treasurer if he wins. In the end, Kyle manages to become the president of that club, and when he sees Kendra walking in disappointment, Kyle asks Kendra if they shouldn't feel like rivals anymore by becoming good friends. To convince her, Kyle invites Kendra to attend a party that he will hold, and she agrees, but she reminds Kyle not to do anything that can humiliate her again. Before going to the party, he prepares a special white flower for his girlfriend, but the girl doesn't like the flower because she thinks that the flower isn't as romantic as Kyle thinks, and finally, she gets upset. Kyle then talks with Lindy, who works part-time as a waitress, and he knows that she's saving money to travel to Machu Picchu, a great tourist destination in Peru. Lindy then wants to take a photo together with Kyle, saying it is for the school bulletin. But before that, Kyle feels confused about his white flower, which is more suitable for a girl. So he decides to put the flower on Lindy, and she smiles, which makes Kyle feel happy. After that, he sees Kendra, who has already come to the party. So Kyle can't believe that Kendra really comes, and he reveals that he actually just wants to play with Kendra by humiliating her in front of many people. But she stays calm about it, and then she starts to do something bad to Kyle, so he moves away from Kendra, feeling that she does something to his body that makes him dizzy and hallucinate. Therefore, Kyle wants to get some fresh air by going out of the party, but his condition stays the same, so he decides to go to the rooftop to really get some air. But still, he keeps hallucinating until he feels surprised when Kendra comes to the rooftop and talks about Kyle's previous words that humiliate her. Therefore, Kyle says that it is just a joke, but his statement can't be accepted by Kendra, and finally, Kyle is cursed to become ugly. This shows that Kendra is a witch all this time, and Kyle only knows who Kendra really is. Kendra then tells Kyle to do a mission, which is to find a soulmate who wants to express her love within a year. And while holding Kyle's hand, Kendra magically creates an image of a cursed tree on Kyle's arm, with flowers that will appear, totaling 6. If the 6 flowers bloom fully, that means the mission time is over, and only the words, "I love you," can free him from the curse. If he fails, Kyle will remain ugly forever. As a result, Kyle can't believe his face that becomes ugly. Even the ugliness spreads to his body. And finally, he feels guilty for his actions toward Kendra. Back at the apartment, Kyle starts to feel insecure when meeting people. And finally, his ugly face gets discovered when his father feels confused about Kyle's behavior. Therefore, his father takes Kyle to a doctor to ask him to make Kyle's appearance good-looking again. But the doctor admits that he can't do it. And finally, Kyle decides to give up without doing something drastic to his skin. So as a solution, his father gives a new house to Kyle so he can stay away from his acquaintances, especially his friends, and hires a maid named Zola to help with Kyle's daily life. Then, his father also spreads a fake rumor about Kyle using drugs and going to rehabilitation, the reason why Kyle doesn't attend school. 4 months pass after that, during which Kyle still hides himself in the big house, and feels a lack of affection when his father keeps being busy, which makes him unable to come home. So instead, his father hires a teacher named Will to teach Kyle many things so he can become a kind and humble person. At first, he refuses, but after knowing that Will is blind, Kyle feels relieved and lets Will come in. Feeling tired of always hiding in the house, Kyle decides to go out and attend a school party. While covering his head and walking, Kyle accidentally bumps into a girl who says he is sweet, which makes him a little confident to show his whole head. There, he meets Kendra and begs her to stop the curse, which of course gets rejected, and she reminds him to find a soulmate who can say love to Kyle. So he goes to meet his old girlfriend, but it turns out she cheats with his close friend, which makes him angry at both of them. Not long after that, Lindy comes and learns about Kyle's anger, but she doesn't realize that the boy in front of her is Kyle. When she talks about Kyle, whom she thinks still has a chance to change, it motivates him a little, and he becomes a little more motivated by Lindy's words. In the end, Kyle keeps thinking about Lindy. Therefore, he decides to visit her house, but he only watches her from afar, not daring to meet her. As a result, Kyle feels insecure again, so he remembers his social media account that still exists. Then he decides to click the delete account button, and finally, his social media disappears with the reason the name Kyle doesn't exist anymore. However, Lindy still stays in his mind. Therefore, Kyle tries to watch her from afar again and stops her activities outside the house. Because he often goes out, Kyle gets caught by Will and Zola stalking Lindy, which he finally admits, so both of them support Kyle to be braver and approach Lindy. Therefore, the next day, Kyle tries to get close to Lindy when a moment is right, but what he sees instead is a problem that Lindy faces with her father. So Kyle tries to find out what happens, and it turns out her father is dealing with debt to two men who threaten him with a gun. Seeing this dangerous situation, Kyle holds back the actions of the two debt collectors and saves Lindy, who faints after being pushed by one of them. Kyle then returns to the father, who apparently has shot and killed one of the collectors with a gun, while the other collector threatens to kill Lindy later, and finally, the collector leaves. Knowing this, Kyle offers to protect Lindy from the threat by letting her stay at his house, but he threatens to report the murder to the police if the father doesn't agree. He has no choice but to agree. So before he and Lindy come to the house, Kyle asks Zola not to tell Lindy that his real name is Kyle, but instead to call him Hunter. After the father takes Lindy to Kyle's house, Lindy asks Kyle not to do anything inappropriate besides giving protection, or she will threaten to beat him. Therefore, starting from now, Kyle acts as a kidnapper by wearing a black mask and giving food to Lindy, but she doesn't want to leave the room to meet him. To make her want to come out, Kyle gives her things that girls usually like, such as expensive bags and jewelry, but it turns out Lindy doesn't like all that luxury. Zola realizes this and asks Kyle what he knows about Lindy's likes, which Kyle can't answer. Therefore, he tries slowly to get closer to Lindy. After watching Lindy, who feels emotional about her life now, Kyle tries to convince her that he won't do anything bad, which makes Lindy trust him a little. Feeling happy, Kyle expresses his feelings by writing a letter to Lindy, but at the same time, he feels afraid to give the letter directly. Realizing that Lindy likes flowers, Kyle starts to build a greenhouse on the rooftop, which will contain flowers inside. This plan then gets known by Lindy when she meets Will. So Lindy takes the initiative to be friends with Kyle, which makes him nervous. However, after they play a guessing game about what the actors say in a Korean movie on TV, they both laugh, which makes Kyle confident enough to show his ugly face, and finally, Lindy falls silent. Kyle thinks that his face is terrifying, but Lindy admits that she has seen worse, and finally, Kyle feels more motivated to get closer to Lindy. With extra help from Will and Zola, Kyle becomes more confident to get closer to Lindy in the greenhouse by giving her coffee from her favorite coffee shop, and he even prepares a beautiful and famous poem that coincidentally Lindy likes, so that they won't disturb the moment. Will and Zola leave Kyle and Lindy alone to read the poem, and finally, they both stare at each other. Realizing that his time is running out, Kyle goes to meet Kendra at her place, where Kyle needs more time, but Kendra tells him that magic can't be removed just like that. While waiting for Kyle to be with Lindy, Kyle asks Kendra to restore Will's eyesight and allow Zola to meet her family in another country. Kendra agrees, but she says all of that will be granted only if Kyle successfully completes his mission. When Kyle meets Lindy again in her room, he sees Lindy's laptop that shows a photo of her with Kyle, which shocks him, as he assumes Lindy liked him when he was still good-looking. Lindy then says that Kyle now reminds her of the old, good-looking Kyle, which makes her flustered and she hits her foot on a hard object twice.
No, I talked to him last night.
Feeling happy because Lindy actually likes the old Kyle, he invites her to walk around the house, which finally makes Lindy feel comfortable near him. But after he carries Lindy, who falls asleep, to bed, there's a chat notification from her father about Lindy's upcoming trip to Machu Picchu, which makes Kyle feel confused about whether to let Lindy go or not, while his curse time is almost over. Because of that dilemma, Will and Zola suggest that Kyle stay with Lindy as long as he can. So Kyle takes her for a trip to a beautiful cabin owned by his father near the lake. During the trip, Lindy gets a message from her father telling her to go home because the other debt collector has been arrested for threatening someone's life. Kyle finds out about this when Lindy feels confused, but he pretends to sleep when Lindy looks at him, and finally, she deletes the message as a sign that she refuses to go home. When they arrive at the beautiful cabin, Lindy feels amazed by how big it is, so she wants to walk around it. After Kyle gives her the love letter while joking, Lindy gets a call from someone who tells her that her father has overdosed and is now being treated in the hospital. Therefore, Lindy quickly goes to the hospital by train. But before Lindy leaves, she says a message. Kyle is a good friend, which makes him disappointed, thinking that Lindy already knows that Kyle loves her. However, Lindy's view changes when she reads the letter that Kyle has written, and it turns out that the content is his confession that he loves her. But Kyle already feels disappointed, so he decides to cut contact with Lindy when she tries to reach him again and again. She even calls Will and Zola to ask what happens with Kyle. So Will and Zola get angry about Kyle's decision to cut contact. After knowing that Lindy is at school before leaving for her trip, Kyle goes to catch her before it's too late, and finally, his ugly face is seen by many people. But he doesn't feel scared anymore until he meets Lindy and expresses his happiness that Lindy accepts him as he is, even when he feels insecure about his ugly face. Lindy then removes Kyle's hoodie, which makes everyone see his ugly face clearly. And finally, the sweet moment that everyone waits for happens. Kyle then tells Lindy to still go, but before she really leaves, she says the words to Kyle, "I love you." And finally, they both smile. Right when the sixth flower on the cursed tree on his arm blooms, Kyle sees a vision of Kendra smiling, and finally, Kyle becomes good looking again. Not long after that, Lindy comes, who postpones her trip and wants to find the ugly Kyle, but when she sees the good-looking Kyle, she doesn't care much because she wants to meet the ugly Kyle. Thinking that the ugly Kyle has gone, Lindy tries to call him, but Kyle's phone rings, and finally, she realizes that the ugly Kyle is the same as the good-looking Kyle now. Kyle tells a childhood story about a woman who loves an ugly man with a monster face and compares it to what they experience now. As a result, Lindy can't believe it. And finally, the sweet moment that everyone waits for happens again. At that time, Will is no longer blind because her sight has returned to normal, and Zola can meet her family from her home country, thanks to Kendra, who fulfills her promise that Kyle had asked before. The movie ends with Kyle's father at his workplace, where he receives news that there is a new intern who wants to work at his company. So he hopes that the intern is good looking, but his assistant tells him that the intern's face is a bit ugly. However, she admits that she can work with magic. It turns out that the intern is the witch Kendra. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notification so you don't miss the latest recaps.